Jacob.
Well, thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I couldn't do any better than begin by echoing the sentiments that the member for Solomon gave just there, about the transformational power of higher education and how we do need to extend that opportunity to as many people as possible in our country, particularly those people who in the past haven't had the access to higher education that they should have, people from First Nations backgrounds, people from socio-economic disadvantaged backgrounds. We do know that higher education transforms lives, and in fact what this bill sets out to do is to do some of the work we need to do to make it accessible to more people. And in fact, I, like so many other people in this place, do have the advantage of a higher education degree. In fact, I'm fortunate enough to have two. And I do know personally how important that access to higher education is for setting you up later in life. It is important on a personal level, but as I was just explaining and as the member for Solomon was explaining, it is also important for our communities and for our country. We do know that in the decades to come, more and more jobs will require a university qualification. The transformations we are seeing across our country, across our economy, across industries, the investments in new green energy, new technology, mean there will be a number of new jobs with new skills required. And what we want is for those jobs to be filled. We want them to be available to all. We want them to be ones that young people in my community in the northeast of Melbourne are able to access, and that young people in the member for Solomon's electorate in the northern parts of this country are also able to access. We want to open up university education so that these jobs of the future that are going to power our country forward are accessible to all. Setting our country up for the best possible future, setting young people in my community and communities around the country up for the best possible future. That's what this government is focused on, and that's what this bill is focused on. Deputy Speaker, we are fortunate in my electorate of Jagga Jagga to have a wonderful university, La Trobe University, located right on our doorstep. And they do at that university, I think, a very good job of trying to be as inclusive as possible, of trying to draw a broad demographic of students and to support those students through their higher education journey. And what we as a government are aiming to do is to support more and more universities to do that and to do it better. I do know that La Trobe is a destination of choice for many young people in my community to access higher education. I'm fortunate enough to visit it frequently. Most recently, I went and saw some students training in allied health, learning how to give consultations around helping people with speech difficulties remotely. You know, really important skill that is vital to so many in our community and that we need more and more people to be working in. La Trobe also does great work when it comes to developing a food hub and agribusiness, again, crucial industries for the future of our country, working together with organisations like CSIRO, building the industries of the future and the job opportunities of the future. I know that it as a university is seen by local students as an excellent accessible option that does set them up for their lives and careers. So I know that it is a university that will benefit from these reforms, and I hope that others around the country will as well. The bill before us is based on the work of the Australian University Accord panel and the interim report they produced. And unlike previous approaches, we're a government who wants to do things that do actually make a difference. And so in planning these changes, we actually brought together a group of experts to do the hard work, to come together and put the experience they have together to inform us on how best we want to shape our university sector into the future. And what that panel has found is that 36% of the current Australian workforce has a university qualification today. But their estimates found that that could jump to 55% by the middle of this century. So that gives us, as a government and as a country, an idea of the skills challenge that we are facing in the years and the decades to come. And as a result of that work, the report that the panel gave us put forward 5 priority actions, and all of which our government has committed that we will implement. And those 5 priority actions were extending access to tertiary education in regional and suburban locations, seizing the ridiculous 50% pass rule put in place by the previous government, ensuring that all First Nations students are eligible for a funded place at university, providing funding certainty through the extension of the Higher Education Continuity Guarantee into 2024 and 2025, and through National Cabinet engaging with state and territory governments and universities to improve university governance. That last part is a very important one. We do want universities that are run well, that have good governance in place, and I'm also really pleased and a really important piece of work that our government has also announced is a working group that will be providing advice on making universities a safe place for both staff and students. We do know that there is still a lot of work to be done on making universities a safe place for staff and students. That has been raised time and time again by students. Universities have taken some action to address sexual assault and harassments on campuses to date, but it is very clear that that hasn't done the job yet. The complete job is not done, and that this needs to change. So again, our government believes that education should be not just accessible, but it should also be safe and fair. So that is a really important part of that reform there. I mentioned earlier that one of the recommendations of the panel and one of the recommendations that this bill addresses is taking away the 50% pass rule put in place by the previous government. That rule was introduced by the previous coalition government as part of its Job Ready Graduates package. It was a harsh rule, and it was introduced to try and dissuade students from continuing in courses that they were, quote, not academically suited for. And so the government pulled together a list that it considered job-ready or national priority subjects and lowered student contributions to attract students to those subjects. Other subjects were set at prices of neutral or increased levels to deter them. What we've seen through those changes is they've actually had little impact on what subjects students are choosing to study, but what they are doing is making it very unfair. They are meaning that if you've got more money, you've got more choice. And if you don't have the money, you're being deterred from an education that you might otherwise need or deserve to get based on what a previous government deemed worthy or unworthy. The 50% pass rule disproportionately disadvantaged students from poor backgrounds and from the regions. Those are the students who are more likely to be in difficult circumstances, to more likely to have unexpected things happen in their life that may interrupt their ability to study, to pass exams, and those people are the people who can least afford to be slugged with higher fees. So this was not a well thought through reform. It has not had a positive impact on our higher education system, and it is a very sensible thing that our government is taking this away. As a country, we can't thrive, we can't get people ready for those jobs of the future if we are in fact penalising people who need support the most and preventing them from being able to take up those opportunities. So from changing this, we will be able to actually change our focus so that what we're looking at doing is improving the success rates of at-risk students, not punishing them, not saying, oh, well, that's it, you're done, or you've got to pay more. We'll work on how we actually help those people to be able to have the success they should be able to have at university. We do know that for all of these students, life isn't one thing at one time. They are juggling a lot. This rule meant that those students were facing undue pressure, and it is an important thing that we're changing that. The advice we have suggests that more than 8,000 students have been or are at risk of being affected by this rule. That's clearly 8,000 too many. We are asking universities to have a plan for these students, requiring them to proactively identify students at risk of falling behind and to set out a plan to help them to succeed. And this might be connecting those students to support, it might be providing them with available financial assistance, it might be arranging crisis response or offering special circumstances arrangements. A much more sensible approach going forward, an approach that will see these students be able to complete their degrees rather than saddling them with unfair debts, higher costs, and in fact dissuading them from being part of our higher education system. One of the other actions in the bill relates to Priority Action 3 from the panel report, which is extending demand-driven funding to Metropolitan First Nations students, recognising that in some ways these First Nations students haven't had the emphasis that they should have been put on them and supporting them to get a university degree. Ensuring that all First Nations students are eligible for a funded place at university. And currently, this particular measure only applies to First Nations students in regional and remote Australia. Going forward, it will apply to all First Nations people undertaking higher education, including in metropolitan areas. The Department of Education estimates that this could double the number of Indigenous students at university within a decade. This measure directly supports efforts towards achieving closing the gap outcome number 6. Broadening this funding will have flow-on benefits for all First Nations communities across Australia by increasing the number of First Nations graduates in the workforce. So there are positives that come from creating more culturally safe and diverse workplaces, increasing the delivery of professional services, and supporting other enterprises requiring university education workforces. Again, this is good not just for these individuals who will benefit from this opportunity to have greater access to higher education. But this is good for our country and for our communities. It is good for making sure that we have people who are qualified to do the jobs we need to make our communities run as strongly as they can. It gives First Nation youth role models in communities, and it means that those First Nations young people can look around them and say, oh, that person did it, I can do it too. That can be my future. That's the trajectory I can be on. This will help our country with the crucial knowledge and skills we need go forward, and it will, more broadly, help us take an important future step forward towards the equality we should have between First Nations people and our broader community, and towards the reconciliation that we are all working towards. Interestingly, the report told us that too few Australians are beginning and completing their qualifications in higher education at the moment. It's predicted that 90% of the jobs created over the next 5 years will require a post-secondary qualification, and 50% will require a higher qualification. But at the same time, completions and demand for places at universities are falling, and completions of a first bachelor's degree is currently at its lowest level since 2014. So if we combine this with the existing skill shortages we already have in our country, you can see the sense of urgency for why our government is bringing these changes forward, for why we are taking the expert advice to fix the mess that we are left with in higher education, and to make sure that we are building a skilled workforce for the future and giving young people in our communities the opportunities that they should have. Again, the evidence shows us that students from underrepresented groups at university make up the most of those people who were affected by that 50% pass rule that I spoke about earlier. And First Nations students are around twice as likely to be affected as their non-First Nations counterparts. So fixing these problems mean we will have more students enrolled in higher education. It will mean we have a fairer system of higher education that does ensure that we get those levels of access and attainment that we need, and a system that better meets our national job and skills needs. We also know this will be good for people's wages, that obtaining a university education is one of the biggest things you can do to increase your wage. The evidence shows us it leads to a 38% increase in men's wages and a 37% increase in women's wages. So unlike those opposite who, when they were in government, did not value our higher education system, did not look at these issues around equity, attainment, around making sure that we had a system that was set up to prepare students for the jobs of the future, our government is interested in making sure that we both support individuals for their growth, but also for the growth of our country. We do know that those opposite, in fact, at a number of points, actively attacked the higher education system in this country. When they refused to provide JobKeeper to public universities, it was a very pointed attack that caused, at that time, a lot of difficulties for universities and, of course, for the staff there. So I'll end where I started, which is saying that many of us in this place benefit from a higher education. We need to extend that to as many people in our community as possible. That's what this bill does. It's what our government is doing, setting up a higher education system that is accessible, that is fair, and that puts our country in a place where we are creating people who can do the jobs of the future. Thank you.